People who fix computers/laptops, what's the worst thing you found on someone's computer? Couple of things. I found a dead rat inside a PC one time. Customer couldn't fathom why it shorted out. Thing was like a mummy too. Old 90-year-old dude comes in with a computer. Pop it on the tester/hook it up to a monitor and his background is the most hardcore gay porno ever. There are like 10 customers waiting in the shop, so I quickly just turned the monitor off, swapped the desktop background out in the back, and did the work. Was at an old couple's house backing up all their pictures, and those two old folks had some nasty self-filmed amateur porn on there. So many grey pubes. Had a customer come in and be like, I don't know why my computer isn't working. Load up the desktop and there's tons of malware. I ask what kind of sites he goes to so I can coach him on how not to get infected again. And like clockwork a bunch of malware pop-ups start flashing and playing the As Entities song took everything in me to just hold it together. All the other things are par for the course sheet hidden porno folders labeled innocuously, like I'm not gonna see some random folder labeled beach stuff that weirdly has like 3 TB in it while I'm backing up your files. Web histories to Nazi sites. Married dudes who 90% of their history is Craigslist hooker links. I mean, you work in it for like 10 years, nothing surprises you anymore. Had the FBI come in one time and take a computer that we were fixing. One lady just left her kid, 2-year-old, at the shop after dropping the computer off for like 3 hours till CPS came and there was a giant brawl in the waiting area. Somebody took a dump on the floor in our line one time. All in all, it was a crazy job. Nothing I've found looking through people's files, because I don't do that. But, for a while, I was the one who'd remote into people in the agency's computers to fix up stuff, fix the occasional connection problem, update software, blah blah blah. Remoted into an executive's computer-owned site, just to recover some stuff, and update a few apps. Boom. Horse cork. Just like the dick. Not even like woman underscore sucks underscore off underscore horse underscore blurry point rap point mkv point mp4 point eggs. Not paging bad dragon. Rush order XL classic chance the stallion. Just on screen. Picture. Actual. Certainly. Real. Living. At one point throbbing. Horse cock. I just, ick now. Didn't really know what to do about it. Went about my business. Did the backups and updates. Kept the image open. Set the machine to sleep, sent a message to my super with the subject line explicit material that basically just said $CEO had like a massive equestrian equine bonus on screen, and I assume it was a joke or something, but like, remind people to not leave sensitive material open or unlocked on machines overnight. Just like, another legal warning or something, as opposed to Kyle, $CEO has an open stash of pony born. I live by the notion that was my arranged by Venus moment, but I've come across plenty of other explicit, stupid, or bad stuff on computers at work. That's just the one that stuck with me the most. Here is my story. This goes way back to 1996. A large financial/insurance company in Boston was going through a reorg and people were getting laid off left and right. They were also reducing their footprint, since they owned 2 buildings in Boston. My father-in-law was one of the workers who assisted with the downsizing. This was way back in before people had real data security departments or equipment disposal policies. To put the rest of my story in perspective, when they cleaned out a floor or area, they threw away/donated the furniture or electronic equipment. Most of the workers who assisted with this basically kept and gave away to friends and family what was worth anything. For some reason my father-in-law was in charge of the computers. There was a stream of still decent 2 to 3-year-old IBM desktops and monitors that found their way back to his house. I would log in as the local admin, sheet security, and he had the password, and wipe the programs and or reinstall a new OS. There was one computer that he grabbed from a coworker. He said it was dead and brought it home. It was less than 6 months old and had a 250 meg hard drive, which at the time was huge. My father-in-law was pretty tight with the guy and he seemed like an up and up dude. I eventually was able to get in after wiping some folders using a DOS-based disk MGMT software I had. When I started to poke around, the guy had a hidden folder filled with pictures of gay porn. That was not the disturbing part nor the fact that he used 200 plus MEG, which at the time was massive. The disturbing part was the Wizard of Oz themed photoshoot. To this day every time the movie comes on I picture Dorothy as a 6 feet ripped gay guy with a porn stash. Never told my father-in-law what I found, but used to chuckle to myself when I saw the guy at family parties with his family. Edited, meant to say Megan not gig. So used to saying gig now. Thanks to the guy who pointed my mistake out. Someone once brought in a desktop and wanted to get their data backed up onto our external hard drive and some hardware upgrades, more RAM, ECT. So I plug in the RAM, hook up the HD, and start the backup. As I'm about to switch my KVM to another machine I was working on, I notice a few of the file names being transferred. They are not wholesome. Cute 9-year-old sucks massive black cork was among the more tame of the file names. I called the police who connected me with the FBI, who sent an agent down that day. I gave a statement and they took the computer. The next day the FBI agent showed back up and asked me to call the customer and tell them their computer was ready for pickup. As soon as he showed up, to get it the FBI swarmed in and arrested him and took him away. It was a very surreal experience. What the fuck did that guy expect me to do? Just let it slide? Is a question I often ask myself when remembering that event. I'm pretty sure he got hit with over 45 counts of child porn possession. I had to testify in court and the lawyer asked if it was possible that he got those through a virus or accidentally and didn't know they were on his computer. I was like, beach, those files were organized in subdirectories. He knew exactly what he was doing. No further questions, Your Honor. Another funnier one was a lady brought her laptop in because it wouldn't boot up. The fans would spin but nothing on the screen. Now, before we get into details, this girl was very attractive, like easily a 10. So I flip over the laptop, unscrew the RAM tab, pull out the battery in the RAM, reseat the RAM, put the battery back in. You would be surprised how often this fixes those types of issues. And bingo bango, laptop boots up. She didn't have a password. Do Windows loads. The desktop picture is this girl, fully naked, spread eagle on a bed, doing all sorts of amazing things to herself. I caught a glimpse, which is now burned into my head forever. Then she caught a glimpse, then slammed the laptop lid down as hard and as fast as she could. I heard the glass crunch. She peeked under, confirming the broken screen, and before either of us could say anything, she grabbed up the laptop and ran out of the store. I never saw her again, and still wonder to this day if she ever got that screen fixed, and I'm envious of whoever ended up fixing it. This must have been 1998/99 I guess. My boss sent me out to a large industrial site we supported. He was pretty cagey, but told me I had to relieve a colleague and I'd have to work late, on top of a long day driving to a remote site and back. I got on site and found an uproar. The sysadmin had been walked off having been caught downloading porn. On work time, he had been collecting and classifying material to burn a whole 650 MB CD-ROM. The management had identified his IP from the proxy logs, and when new downloads started they checked the IP address and verified that he was sitting at his computer. All very sad. He was quite a good guy, but a bit crude. Anyhow, we had a busy time changing service accounts and locking down modems and basically ensuring that the former sysadmin could not access or damage anything remotely. Then, because I was the backup and Exchange admin, I got to spend hours restoring his Exchange mailbox from daily backups looking for additional evidence of malfeasance. Which I found, an email containing a selfie taken with the company's new digital camera, showing far too much detail, and sent to someone we suspected was not his wife, but who worked at the same company as her. I needed much eye bleach and gave up on the Exchange restores after that. The management had all the data they needed and we were done. Somewhat later, they employed someone to write a formal internet access policy. That employee was also fired for accessing pornography at work. He did a lot of work at the weekends. His particular kink was coprophagy. I was glad I wasn't the primary reviewer on that case. Finally, an credit that applies to me. Although the company I used to work for did not poke around in people's information, we would have to migrate data sometimes, and you just see stuff. I have seen many nudes from the customer, being their own or just born, and I guess unsurprisingly a lot of dudes who were not ashamed of me seeing this born. I'm a female. Definitely the weirdest was an older gentleman who had a folder labeled nearly nude on his iPad. It was just a bunch of pictures of men in underwear and bathing suits from like retail websites. One time while helping an old lady set up and activate her new phone, all sorts of dick pic notifications pop up in the messages. Bugs inside of computers too many times to count, and an iPhone once. Also beads and random sheets stuck in fans was a normal occurrence. Unrelated but definitely the grossest. A lady spilled a bowl of chili on her laptop, chili coming like through the USB ports, and wanted us to pull the drive to recover information. We were able to get her data, but ants swarmed the computer overnight because of the chili, and I had to double bag that sheet the next morning and leave it for her to pick up as is. Edit, changed I to I, because Apple software sucks sometimes. It's what I found in the computer that was disturbing. I once worked at the Genius bar at Apple. A customer came in and set his iMac on the bar. I hooked up the computer to our network and reached over to power it on. When I reached over, I noticed an off-putting smell. The customer didn't appear to have hygiene high on their list of priorities, so I chalked it up to that. Turns out the Mac wouldn't power on, so I checked it in and went about my evening. I was on the repair shift that night, so I started with troubleshooting that computer. The Mac had to be opened to check diagnostic lights and verify the power button was working. The iMac was a late 2012 which has glue running along the edges of the display. We cut the glue with a small pizza cutter looking thing and carefully pull the display off. I did all of those things, and when I pulled the display off, cockroaches ran everywhere. They weren't as bad as the smell. It was awful. Now, usually we seal the unit in a bag and tell the customer it's a hazard and they have to come get it, or we will dispose of it in 60 days. However, I still have a display hanging off the front and I can't return a computer that is in pieces. So, my manager comes in and grabs the computer and a can of compressed air, takes the computer out to the loading dock and sprays the little bastards out of the Mac so we can reseal it. The customer never came back, and the computer was considered abandoned. I miss that job sometimes. I just want to say up front that I never go looking for people's porn. If it's not directly causing the problem I'm trying to fix, I don't care. So, I work at an MSP, basically an IT company that does it for other smaller companies that don't need a full-time IT department. It's generally looked down upon by corporate sysadmins, but I'm young, and it's a good place to learn a lot really fast. All my clients are companies. I don't work on people's personal stuff anymore. Well, sometimes my boss will need some kind of technical favor done that might get us a client. I hate these kinds of favors because they usually involve working on the client CEO's family members' computers. The most recent, and hopefully last one, was to see if I could recover anything off some lady's computer that had been hit by a crypto variant. I got to her apartment and immediately wished I'd refused. From what I saw and heard during my time there, she was a divorced gold digger who bought everything she saw on QVC and recently had facial plastic surgery that she must have cheaped out on in my opinion. It only encrypted her documents and files, not the OS or anything like that. I was able to stop it so it would not get any worse and was working on seeing if I was able to recover any of it when she let me know that she only really cared about her pictures. I'm sort of able to recover some pictures, but I had to open a few up to make sure they weren't corrupted and would actually open. Most of them didn't, but a few did. I really wish they hadn't opened either. There were pictures of her mid-plastic surgery, family vacation photos, and naked men in nothing but cowboy boots and cowboy hats. The worst part was that they were all in the same root folder. Like, come on, at least make separate folders for your born and family photos. Anyways, I was trying to think of a way to tell her I got only some things back without it being awkward, but I noticed she had a flash drive on her desk that said back scratched into the plastic. Turns out it was a backup of all her stuff that Geek Squad had made a few months ago. For the first and last time ever, I'll say, thanks Geek Squad, you deal with a lot of shit that we are all glad we don't need to do. I restored all the files to her computer and then got out of there as quickly as possible, just saying yep, it's all back as of a few months ago, best I could do. K thanks bye. Fast walk to car. I had this guy come into my shop once with 10 to 20 born banners, 3 to 4 viruses, and every time you opened a browser it would just spam born websites. I told the guy there was no way we could fix it, and we would back up his files if we could, and wipe the hard drive clean, and do a reinstall of Windows. That would fix everything, and he wouldn't have to worry about them coming back, as long as he didn't visit those sites again. He was adamant he had not visited any sites that would get him a virus. But it is common to hear that in my line of work. The next day at 6 AM in the morning on the dot he comes back, and it's got all the same viruses again and more. He wants his money back, and starts ranting about how I did a bad job and such. So my reputation on the line, I removed enough of the viruses that I could access the internet browser history and the temporary internet files. I showed him the websites that were visited and played several born videos for him. I even told him the time those websites were pulled up. As soon as I told him the time, it dawned on him, it wasn't my fault. You see, he had dropped the computer off at home, and he didn't have time to use it. But he hooked everything up before leaving. His son, or nephew, I can't remember, hopped on that sheet right when he left for work, and had a FAP session, and ruined his PC a second time. I charged him for a second reinstallation of Windows/data backup, no remorse. Worst thing ever to see on another person's computer is little black curly hair on the keyboard. Disclaimer, I do not do this professionally, it is only my hobby that I know and like to fix computers. So in the go to guy for my whole family and friends when computer goes bad. As for fixing surprises, hardware, PC was overheating, so I took the cover off a tower PC, and I found a dead, partly rotten, partly fried mouse stuck to the metal case. People from the house said that something was stinking a month earlier, but they haven't found it. On top of the mouse there was also a lot of dust and spider webs. Think never open computer that works 12 hours a day for 3 years. Why did they not clean the inside of the PC? Because it would void warranty in their opinion. Software, like 5K viruses, malware etc. On girlfriend's uncle laptop. Some sort of Chinese add-on programs, dialers and much more. Sheet was so infected that every try of even installing antivirus ended up in system crash because viruses protected themselves and were taking whole memory of the decide. The add-ons had Chinese installers, so trying to install one was like a minefield. Click in wrong place and you would install 3 more of these. Needless to say, uncle looked at born str8 from Google and clicked yes to everything. If you tried to write P or X in Google or URL, you had hella history of his activities. Worst part, him and his wife were sitting behind me all the time to learn something wife insisted, and the poor guy was like, please don't tell her wife face. Marriage in their 50s with very religious wife. If you are using your friends/family help with computers, please for the love of God use privacy mode in the browser. It will be a lot easier for you and the other person to look in your eyes again after the help. Touching the keyboard of a person with born browser history is for me one of most disgusting feelings ever. I grew up on a farm, and I was less disgusted staying in pigsty all day and throwing shit with pitchfork than looking at a man's autofilling history. I never actually found anything disturbing in files, but to be honest neither did I look for them in the first place. I mean, yeah, there were some hidden FAP folders or naked photos, but nothing a normal person wouldn't watch/have. All of these are terrible from an outside perspective. I don't find that kind of stuff. In my current position, I do a lot of data/it analysis and then make suggestions or implement changes to systems and processes. One of the first things we were trying to do was minimize our on-prem footprint by migrating as much as we could to Oz. During the discovery phases of this project, I had to deep dive the file share. There was about 500 GB of sheet going back 18 years. Most of it was old backups, files, and contracts relating to clients we no longer had, and random projects. The bulk of the space, though, was consumed by a folder called software. Looking in, it seemed like an image repository for all the various applications we had purchased over the years. Most of it, I recognized from our licensing master list. But, there were a few things in there that I knew we didn't use and was fairly certain we didn't have licenses for. Anyone that has worked with these kinds of programs will know that having an image and having a key are two very different things. I left most of the images alone thinking we may have keys somewhere else or maybe we would purchase some in the future. But then I started finding the files that I didn't want to find. //philosopher/software/adobe CS6 master collection by XXX420 /crackpoint/dll /philosopher/software/windows_xp_sp2 uploaded_clean_demonoid_blackhead/keygen point eggs //philosopher/software/SQL server 2016 clean/readme disconnect internet and woo before install point info. I showed my partner and he just about cheat himself. We went to the COO and CTO and asked them about it. Apparently they thought the guy responsible for those files, former employee, had deleted them. We set the thing on fire. Well, I have seen just about every instance of what's been mentioned. I have seen the viruses that became the OS. I have seen coworkers ask me to migrate files off of a machine with naked pictures of themselves and large thumbnails. I have gone on site to a law firm to work on a guy's computer that he brought from home and watched 4 large cockroaches fly out of it and swarm the office. But I don't know if anything was worse than the roach lady. I used to do on-site repair for a large company, and one of the setups we had to work on was the dreaded Packard Bell. My first journey to the roach lady's house, she told me not to look for the address, because there were no numbers on the trailer. I was told to look for the orange mailbox. Well, that should stand out, I thought. I was expecting a bright orange box, the kind you might see a newspaper delivered in. Turns out the mailbox was orange because it was completely rusted through to the point where 50% of the mailbox was gone. If mail came on a rainy day, it was going to be soaked. Consider that foreshadowing. I don't know if words can really describe what I saw when I walked inside. You've probably gathered that it didn't smell great. It was a lone woman and her child in a playpen, who she immediately informed me did not belong to her, but was some relative's child that she was forced to watch. I can't decide if her teeth screamed meth addict or no dental care ever, but all of this didn't matter. I had a job to do, and I had been in some bad places before. When I first laid eyes on the computer setup, it looked typical. PC, monitor, mouse, keyboard, scanner, inkjet printer. Now imagine the setup is by a window. Now throw that image out of your mind, because this setup was by a giant hole in the wall. When I say giant hole, I mean imagine that a giant 8x8 area of the wall was completely missing and covered with 2 sheets of visqueen that just opened in the middle and flapped in the wind. This was the choice for the location of the computer setup. I learned that it was very important to get the computer running because she used it for her job, which was one of those work-at-home jobs where you handle medical billing. To this day, anytime I think about why my medical bills look like they were coded by the cast of Idiocracy, I think of this setup. Everything about the setup was damp. The table had beads of moisture everywhere. The buttons on the printer were wet. I have no idea how anything managed to work. Worst of all, the mousepad was wet. Imagine soaking your mousepad in the sink, no, the toilet, and then resting your hand on it while you worked. I couldn't take it. I had to move the mousepad and take my chances on the wet table. Now the fun begins. There are 2 small roaches under the mousepad. One isn't quite dead yet. I'm not certain if they are there for survival or if the mousepad was placed on top of them to contain them. I put the mousepad back on the roaches and learned to live with my hand resting on the toilet soaked mousepad. Now it's time to take the cover off of the PC. So many roaches. A giant nest of them inside, loving the heat and relative dryness. The roach lady doesn't seem to notice her children scattering about, racing off to hide in other crevices, as if it were perfectly normal to watch countless roaches emerge from the inside of your computer. I don't even remember what it was I had to replace. I would imagine it was something with moving parts that were clogged up with roaches, maybe a CD-ROM drive. Speaking of moving parts, she told me the printer wasn't working, and would I take a look at that too? I felt so bad for the living conditions of this lady. I didn't mind going a little above and beyond the mission. It was pretty obvious that the printer was also a cozy little nesting area for about 20 or so roaches. Anyway, I start doing some printer diagnostics, and it would seem that the print nozzles were clogged up. I pull out the ink cartridge, and as you probably guessed, it looked like someone literally put in the ink cartridge and slammed it into multiple roaches. They were smashed all over the nozzle and the part of the cartridge that the printer uses to detect it. Casually, I stated that this was likely the problem, and did you have a paper towel to clean this off with? There was no fixing this though. There were roach guts smashed all inside of the cartridge carrier, and by this point I was nearing the end of my limits and generosity. You might think I'm making it up, but she asked me to check the scanner too because it wasn't scanning. As I had stated repeatedly, moisture wasn't really good for electronic devices, which might explain everything behaving erratically, and I'll be damned if I didn't do a test scan and watch as 3 roaches lit up under the glass. I just stared, dumbfounded as to how roaches managed to get into what I believed was a sealed piece of equipment. Nature finds a way. I think the last thing I can remember before leaving was looking at the bedpost of the bed that was next to the PC setup. I do not exaggerate when I tell you that I saw a very steady stream of roaches, some of the fastest roaches I have ever seen in my life, racing up and down the bedpost, both into a crevice in the ground and up under the sheets. I left dreading what a night in that bed must be like. She called in another ticket within a few weeks to a month. A coworker who had a knack for helping out by taking simple looking calls in the vicinity of his house that he could knock out and then write 2 hours after while he sat at home in his underwear offered to help me out by taking it. I was only too happy to spread the joy. I was helping out my grandfather with his computer last year. He told me that it was running really slowly and he couldn't click on anything. He then told me that he keeps getting pop-ups that tell him the FBI are coming after him. When I went on his computer, he had about 500 plus tabs on Internet Explorer, and you thought one window on that shitty browser was slow. And I'd say about 1/3 of them were websites selling guns. He was browsing through pages and pages of automatic rifles and pistols and silencers and submachine guns. The list goes on. The other 2/3 of the websites were either born, Facebook, or YouTube videos of rock bands he listened to in the 80s. After I had closed all of the tabs and downloaded Google Chrome, I explained to my grandfather how to use incognito mode. He immediately starts googling his favorite granny born website. It had the word donkey in it, and I really wish I could remember what it was called. When the video starts playing, he says so, when I'm watching my porno, they won't track it. So grandma won't see. Yes, grandpa. Seriously though, I think the FBI was monitoring his computer. My grandpa has a collection of guns already, so I'm sure he was just looking to expand his collection. There were messages telling him that the FBI were blocking him from several websites and that he was being monitored. Now a not so dark one. I made my social service, pro bono obligatory work in the ed department of my faculty. One day a really pretty woman came crying to the department, a rare case, because we were located at a literal storage room, with racks of old computers and LCD screens and only one small window. The girl was finishing her business master's thesis, and had everything stored in a 256 megabytes USB key. It was 2006, and somehow the USB key was formatted, clean wiped with the final draft and a lot of documents of her thesis. It was Thursday afternoon and the presentation was on Monday 8 AM. She had only one really early backup. So I calmed her and asked her if there was other stuff made to the USB key other than formatting. Nothing else saved, nothing else moved. She replied no, so I ran a trial recovery software that I found in a quick Google search and put the USB key to recovery and I asked her to return next day. Fortunately the thesis was almost completely recovered. All the formatting of the document was wrong and almost all images were lost, but they could be easily redone with the spreadsheets recovered. She was now crying of happiness. I refused to get paid because of internal service policies, but she insisted if there was anything she could do to gratify me. I asked for a Coke from the vending machine outside the building. She delivered me 2 cans of Coke with a thank you note. Long story, possibly worth a read. I did it support while in college. I should mention that our university issues laptops to every student and offered free ed support to everyone. Most of the computer issues were small and did not take too long to solve. Very rarely would someone come up with a serious issue that had a few of us stumped. Then there was that guy. This guy was every myth, tall tale, wives tale, urban legend, chupacabra of a worst customer to deal with. To start off, I know I'm no one to judge people because I would not appreciate some judging me before they get to know me, but this guy had absolutely no shame about his appearance. He had heavy dandruff, rip/stain/very baggy cloths, mild turrets, very bad eating habits and a stink eye that would make you flinch. Here are a few things I dealt with before I addressed his initial issue. Random hair/food/crumbs/nail clippings/dirt and ants in the keyboard and on the edges of the screen bezel. What looked like cake/brownie mashed in the side vent. He complained about overheating. On the side of the computer there was what looked like a cookie smashed into the USB ports and HDMI port. I think there was a chocolate chip hanging on the edge. That or some type of bug that died trying to eat what was there. What looked like, and I'm still telling myself this so I can sleep at night, dried up yogurt on the palm rest, the same palm rest I place my very own palm without looking. I should point out that as I'm working on his computer he took paper from a nearby printer and started walking around in circles in front of the help desk while ripping up the paper to very small pieces, then rubbing it in his hair and shaking it around until it all fell on the floor. After 24 Clorox wipes and a quarter bottle of hand sanitizer, I plug the computer in to turn it on and nothing. No power, no blinking lights to indicate an error. So I start troubleshooting. I replace the battery, check the power cord, and finally remove the keyboard to check the connection of the power button to the motherboard. Holy shit, I have no idea how he accomplished this, but there was Doritos, ants, part of a starburst wrapper, and brown residue everywhere. As I continue to take the computer apart, my manager sees how bad it is and tells me to just take his HD out and transfer it to a loaner computer. As I start to transfer his documents, his hard drive only had 10 megabytes out of 250 GB free. I transfer his document, pictures, songs, then the important videos. This whole time he was stressing on how I needed to transfer everything. Well, his important videos were all born. Problem was one of the videos was corrupting the HD. He still wants all of the videos. I told him I'm not cherry picking, no pun intended, through all these videos to see which ones can be copied over. He leans in over the counter, smelled like he didn't shower in days. And he stares me down and tells me in a low deep voice, transfer the fucking files so I can leave. My manager deleted all of his born and told him next time he brings his computer in he will be charged for our services. When he walked away I suddenly felt a huge sigh of relief and was able to breathe normally again. However, little did I know that would not be the last time I dealt with that guy. If anyone is interested, there are sagas 2 and 3. I come from a tiny town, 5,000 plus people, average age closing in on 40 or 50. Everyone knows everyone, basically. So being a kid that had spent their entire childhood fiddling with computers, building my own, upgrading others, installing and reformatting and whatnot, I was the go-to computer guy for a few friends. My mom somewhat advertised it too, so I got to go around and try and fix her co-workers' home PCs as well. This story is about a family that was as close to the fundamentalist Christian you generally see only on documents about crazy Americans as you can get in this country. They had 3 boys, one who was older than me by a decade, and 2 that were younger than me by almost as much. Through my teenage years, I was very successfully indoctrinated to the Christian youth activities, and here's where I friended the 2 younger siblings. And they were complaining that the PC was kinda slow. Could I take a look? Never been to their house. We weren't that close friends, but sure, I'll try and help. Get to a tiny office space in their house that has the computer almost out of disk space. Not unusual. This is the days of cable modems and this grandpa of a PC is rocking Windows 95. If it's on, it'll fill up the hard drive. The garbage collection on Win95 was utter bullshit. I go through all the temp folders, clearing caches left and right. We are not in the red anymore, Captain. But something is still off. Just do a CTRL plus A, Alt plus ENTER on the root of the hard drive. There's at least 10 gigs missing. Show hidden files. Ah, there we go. A folder named after the oldest brother, currently in his early 30s. Now I already know where this is going. I have a similar setup back home, like the horny teenager I am. My parents aren't that good with computer. Simple hidden flag on a folder is sufficient. The older brother knew his family wasn't that good with computers, and he had a pious reputation to uphold. Did I mention they were pretty damn conservative Christians? Not in a picket gay funeral kind of way, but turn the other cheek. Church every week. Pray at any occasion you're invited to. Do your own Bible groups. No hand holding before marriage way. Well, big brother had a thing for bestiality and young looking girls. I don't mean child born young, but barely legal. But there was some video footage that gave dogger style a whole new meaning. Faces of younger siblings were priceless. They genuinely came across as boys who've never even masturbated, and they were brought up with the sensibilities of people viewing sexuality as a necessary evil, to be endured in marriage for reproductive purposes. Seeing their pious big brother's twisted porn collection probably took a few days or weeks to process. So I deleted the porn, ran a few virus scans, and the PC was running as well as a Win95 machine just can. I worked at my college's IT department, the technical support center. I remember I was pulling in for work one day and this guy wearing a all black duster getting out of his car with the license plate 666. I went inside, clocked in, and went to our computer intake line as we were just opening, and I was the only one there. The guy comes in, duster, greasy curly hair, glasses, and a very strong odor about him. Tells me he needs viruses removed, and a new antivirus. I talk him through what I'll need to do ECT point, and have him sign some paperwork. After I handed him the paperwork I realized he had an amputated arm. He covered his arms with an oversized duster. He signed the papers, handed them to me, and shook my hand. I could feel this layer of greasy oil-like material, and I nearly gagged. I went to go wash my hands, and then got ready to start working on his computer. I see he has a million extensions running on Chrome, and I open it up to see what's going on when I'm assaulted with devil-related hentai. Pop-up after pop-up after pop-up. I immediately burst out laughing at first, then I quickly changed my attitude. All I could think about was how I shook this guy's greasy cum hand that I know is his jack-off hand to some devil hentai. Thankfully I was not there when he came in to pick up his computer. I'm not sure I cold looked him in the eyes. Oh man, I used to work at a computer repair shop in high school. I have some horror stories. From finding rat corpses to roach nests, but the worst/best one was from a guy we nicknamed Born Director. He brought in his computer because it was running slow, so we started it up once he was gone, and, by the gods, I was not prepared. His desktop was filled, as in every space, used and stacked on top of each other, with folders of Born. The labels were random numbers and each file had between 20 to 50 videos each. All the video files were named Namek's name, type of Born, for example Albert X Jessica, foot fetish. But the man was obviously not picky. Every type of Born, multiple people, all male, all female, trans, midget, scat, fetish, bondage. Delving deeper provided that the only other things in the computer were a video player, the Windows files, and Internet Explorer. Every other file was Born, even into the hard drives. That's right, drives, plural. He had 2 hard drives each a terabyte, and they were both filled to the brim with Born. We ended up informing Born Director that his computer was slow due to the number of files on his computer and the amount of dust buildup. I had seen worse, but there was a bit of it. He thanked us, paid us for the diagnosis, and as he walked out turned around and asked, "Did you enjoy any of it? I won't be mad." Winked and walked out. And that's the story of Born Director, who I later realized probably also had some kind of computer diagnosis fetish I had fulfilled for him. Used to do at work for a small consulting group. We tended to have a very close relationship with our clients, even visiting their homes to do repairs, and knowing their families. We had a long-time client come in with a broken laptop, and asked us to recover the data from his old drive, and move it to his new laptop. We finished the job with no problems and needed to verify data transferred over, so we clicked on a random image, which was a professionally lit nude photo of his wife. Realizing we were walking into a minefield, we tried another set of files hoping they'd be less risque, and found photos of him in lingerie and makeup. We decided that we should probably assume the data transfer was completed before we stumbled onto anything further. The return of the laptop was awkward for both parties, as well. Our client actually tried joking with us to break the obvious tension, saying hope you didn't find anything too embarrassing in there. To this day I'm not sure if he forgot they were on there or just wasn't expecting us to have to look at the files. Made future support calls all that more interesting. Funny thing was he had nicer legs than his wife. Coworker got killed in a pilloop on the interstate on the way to work. Very sad. He was a nice guy and always helpful. About all we knew about his personal life was that he lived way out of town in a rural area. He was divorced, and he had a teen daughter who lived with his ex out of state. He didn't socialize or come to work functions, so he was something of a mystery. Nowadays when you want to reissue a computer you just pull a hard drive and destroy it, new drive and image and off you go. In those days, late 90s, you would pull off documents and anything else that might be useful to the next user, wipe the drive, reinstall the OS and the docs. Usually took about half a day. The tech comes to me, I was director of that program, and says we got a problem. I walk down the hall and sure enough, kiddie born. Lots of it. The tech says maybe we should turn this over to the cops. I thought about it for a moment, walked down the hall to talk to our overall vice president, and we decided to just destroy the drive. The guy was dead, no reason to destroy his daughter's memories. We pulled the drive, took it to a machine shop, and had it pounded to bits. At the funeral the three of us just kept our peace. I know in these days of forensic they might be able to find out the origin of images, but at that time, that was just about impossible. I used to do Microsoft support over the phone, circa 2004 to 2007, mainly Office and Outlook. We'd try to use it as a last resort, but sometimes situation called for remote access, initiated through the browser of course. I never forget when some dude granted me access to his computer and had his favorite /history open in a side pane of IE, and it was all born. Except for one Bob Newhart link. Bonus story, not computer related, but I also used to sell cell phones, and we had a little box that could plug an old and new phone in and initiate a contact transfer. Nothing fancy, just a nice little value add. This decently attractive milfy type was going BlackBerry to iPhone or something, and was really insistent we get her pics from one to the other. I explained that was more than our little box could do, and only sometimes worked when going from like to like. Even tried to walk her through doing it at home later. She batted her eyelashes and asked if there was anything I could do. So I took the phone around to our tech area that wasn't as locked down and hooked straight into the system by USB. At this point I told her I might have to manually move them over. That's fine, whatever you've gotta do. My mind often goes straight to the gutter, but her insistence and openness made me think that it was probably just some pics of her kid. There were definitely pics of her kid there, about a dozen or so, and one of mom's tigs, and one of mom blowing her boyfriend. I kept my poker face on, unplugged the phones, and handed them back to her. She took a second to check the camera roll, to make sure everything was there, smiled and thanked me. The worst I ran into was repairing a computer for a friend of mine. He bought an SAD, and wanted it in his laptop. So I boot it up, and it's taking a very long time. He said that would happen. So while waiting for it to boot I got the paperwork from his original purchase. The thing was a monster. i7, 16 gigs of RAM, 1070 card, 500 gig main drive SSD and a 1TB in drive. He wanted the second drive replaced. So I get on there, and the Windows login screen is just a giant unpleasant looking vagina. Looked like a set of theater curtains with a bloody eyeball in the middle. I log in with his info he gave me, and mother god the amount of open folders on his desktop were amazing to see. Everything from large tags to slimy sweaty fact ramps. I notice that both faking drives are almost entirely full. Okay cool, he's got to have games on here right? He had every version of The Sims from the first to the most recent. I believe it's The Sims 4. run some cleanup, and found 13,000 virus and malware hits. Took me like 10 hours to transfer files off the computer, clean it up, and put the new SSD in the machine. I hand him the computer back the next day and he says, "So, did you like what you saw?" I refused to ever fix his sheet again after that. Once I saw the big brown fact town and one that said super secret mega fac. I worked as a Geek Squad agent back in 2007. Someone dropped off a tower and said they left their wallet in their car. I expected them to come back in a couple of minutes, but after a half hour, I realized they were not coming back. I set the tower aside and helped other customers. I was working a closing shift, and after all the tasks were taken care of before the store closed, I decided to see what was wrong with the computer. I plugged it in, and it wasn't powering on at all. I messed around with the external cables and tried hitting the power button several times until I came to the conclusion that it must be an internal wiring issue or dead so. I flipped the tower on its side and opened the side panel, to which I was presented with a disgusting sight. I've seen some nasty interiors of computers before: dust bunnies, cobwebs, chunks of food and debris. The worst were computers with households with smokers. The smell and caked layers of cigarette smoke was gross. This computer had things living inside it though. When I opened the panel, several cockroaches were running around inside the computer, along with possibly a couple of spiders. There was also a collection of dust bunnies and cobwebs inside. I slammed the panel shut and backed away from the site. I assumed the person that brought it in thought they could just leave it with us and we would take care of it, which was weird because we were offering a recycling deal to dispose of old electronics. After collecting myself, I decided that it was best that the tower did not remain in the store and that it needed to be out of the area. I took the tower around back, with it being inside a garbage bag, and went to the lowest point of the roof I could find, and I hammer threw it on top of the store. Everyone had left, and it was toward the back where there were no cameras. A couple of years ago, I was curious as to what my old neighborhood looked like, and poked around on Google Maps. I went to my old store, and I think I may have seen a black object on top of the roof, where I flung the tower. So, it wasn't necessarily on the computer, more like inside the computer. As for on the computer, I did a data backup for a customer, and found child pornography on his hard drive. The store had to call the cops, and we had to call the customer to tell him his data backup was done. The cops were waiting for him at the store once we identified it was him. TLDR, cockroaches and other nasty stuff inside the actual computer, and someone else had child pornography, and I had to call the cops for them to arrest him. This happened about 2 months ago. I'm known by the group of parents from my son's daycare as the guy that can fix computers. One of the moms hired me to back up their photos and documents onto an external hard drive and do a factory reset on the laptop, as she was planning on selling the laptop. Unfortunately, their data was quite scattered across the laptop's 2 hard drives, and I had to go searching for stuff they might want. You know, I wanted to do a thorough job. Then I found her husband's Born folder. It made me sad. It was a couple hundred 200x150 3GP Born videos that seemed to have come from some cell phone subscription service. Not only was the actual video quality so horrible, but the Born itself looked like it was ripped from VHS tapes from the 90s. The poor guy's my age, in his 30s. He has the whole internet at his fingertips. Literally any Born he could want is right there. Yet he spends a shitload of money downloading horrible quality Born videos from some cell phone service. I really felt sorry for the guy. And yes, I did copy over his shitty Born onto their external. Excellent. Something I'm familiar with. I'm an id-size admin at a fairly large legal company in the UK. Our regular desktop and laptop systems are locked down pretty tight, so you'd have trouble getting anything onto the systems that wasn't put there by us. Our firewalls are pretty strong too, so any sites of a less than reputable nature are filtered out. Occasionally Google Toolbar or Ask.com Toolbar slip through the net, and we sometimes get the odd bit of malware sneak onto a PC if someone clicks on a banner ad. However, our antivirus suite has an on-access scanner which locates it and zaps it straight away 99.99% of the time. The most interesting stuff I've seen on our main systems are some sets of holiday pics, including a few of some of our cuter female users in bikinis. Also, when investigating an exchange issue, I stumbled across a quite lengthy and graphic thread of emails between our married male sales manager and an also married female customer handler. As it transpires, they had been meeting up quite regularly for illicit liaisons in an empty office on the top floor of the building, which was unoccupied at the time. I had considered hooking up a covert camera in that room to catch them at it, but never got around to it. One of them left the company soon afterwards, so that was the end of that. Another thing that was before my time, but one of the other admins told me about. A guy who still works here, with his wife, who sits about 3 desks away from him, was quite into his erotic fiction, and used to write his own on the company system. Didn't flag up any alerts as it was a bunch of random Word documents labeled sales reports or something similar. One of the techs stumbled across it when copying his saved documents over to a new PC. One final thing though, a few years ago we had 6 contractors from India come in for a couple of months to test some new software for us. As they were required to install and tweak software for testing purposes, they were loaned a company laptop each, with local administration access, so they could do the stuff they needed to do. They were able to take the laptops off-site as they were traveling around a few of our regional offices, to speak to staff, etc. At the end of their contracts, the laptops were all handed back, so we checked them over before formatting the hard drives, and installing a fresh base image on them to give them to other users. 2 had nothing of interest, some personal browsing, Facebook, Twitter, Yahoo BCT point, but nothing out of the ordinary. 3 more had their internet histories completely cleared, so there was nothing to see there either, but the 6th laptop was absolutely chock full of Indian born. Mostly low resolution, poor quality, acca filmed with a potato, amateur stuff. Just generic setch, no CP or BDSM or anything like that, but as I found out, a lot of Indian born seems to have implied incest as a theme. They seem to be quite fond of their aunts, as I found out from all of the searches on Zamster.com and Yaborn.com for sexy DC aunties and auntie born. In the end nothing was done about it, we just reformatted the drive, had a laugh, and forever after referred to that guy as auntie born guy. Short answer, crabs. Yes, I worked support for a large PC manufacturer. One night I get a from a woman, who sheepishly explains that she borrowed her daughter's computer and now it's not powering on. I go through the motions, collect her information and the system's serial number. I find the laptop is registered to her daughter and marked as a promo unit. I dig a little further and see that we had provided it to her daughter as part of a scholarship reward. So, I start a ticket and begin asking probing questions. Like, does the power light come on or the AC adapter light go out when it's plugged in? The woman proceeds to explain to me that they borrowed it for a month so she could do some work. Then proceeds to tell me that it got crabs. Now, it didn't really register with me, so I repeated back loudly, "Your laptop has crabs," which obviously drew some attention on my row in the call center. The woman was a little distraught and affirmed that it did have crabs and was sprayed during her performance. She got carried away in one of her cam sessions and it resulted in her squirting. Now, her daughter was asking for the laptop back and didn't want to admit to her what happened. Well, it turned out the system had accidental damage coverage. I started a biohazard system exchange to replace it. Biohazard flags it, so no return is requested. This flag encompassed all bodily fluids from all species. Yes, that happened. Here are a few from my days in residential. It once had a guy come into our store and use a demo machine to play a DVD recording of his colonoscopy. Once had a customer come in demanding a warranty replacement of his optical drive because it wouldn't open after a month. This happened again a month later, and we asked to see the machine. It was stained yellowish brown and most of the fans were totally gummed up from tar due to him chain smoking beside it. He was actually drying out the rubber band that acts as a drive belt for the tray to the point where it would snap. We found him another candles bandless model. Once had a computer come in with bugs. Literally ants in the notebook. Had a tower come in from a farm with a dead mouse in it, turds and all. Once had a parent bring in their teenage son's notebook. It had unidentifiable residue all over the screen and keyboard. Looked like someone were eating clam chowder and sneezed. Moral of the story, clean your before you bring it in to be fixed. I wear gloves, but it's still disgusting. As for content, I've seen a few faked up things. Probably the worst was either an old high school acquaintance with bestiality, born in his downloads folder, was just looking to run my installer form bam. Or kiddie born on another customer's, which we promptly reported to the police. A customer once drew our attention to pictures they had of a swingers party they had recently attended. They were pretty damn old and veiny. Had a customer come in distraught because in the last 3 months she'd been charged over $1,000 in overages by her ISP. Turns out her faking grandkid had downloaded Arkham Asylum and left it seeding. He'd seeded it several hundred times over. About 18 years ago I worked for a small business that did on-site repairs for home users and businesses. They would never turn down a sale, even if they would make next to no profit. As such, they had some weird customers. I got sent to install a printer a home user had purchased, an older man in his 70s. He said everything was upstairs in his home office. He said home office. What he meant was either masturbatorium or wank palace. The room absolutely reeked of jizz. It was covered wall to wall with vintage erotica. The computer powered up and there were more pictures of elderly topless ladies. Attempting to be professional, I went to get ready to log into his computer, but then I saw something that made me stop. Not the half-empty Kleenex box on the desk, not the half-empty jar of hand cream, but a jungle of pubic hair poking out between the rows of keys. And I do mean jungle. It looked like someone had stuck keyboard keys on Burt Reynolds' chest. That was the worst physical thing. The worst data-wise was at a recent client at another company. I was doing some routing checks. The data drive on a server was running low on space, so I scanned the shares to see what was hogging space. The roaming profile share is normally a great one, as people keep all sorts of unrelated crap on their desktop, which gets uploaded to the server, and someone always has a massive iTunes directory for me to copy. One user had a very large videos folder in their profile, so I checked what was in there. There was a folder named Dogs, and a 500 MB video named Who's a Good Girl. You can't unsee a naked woman willingly getting mounted by an aroused Alsatian. I wish I could. Normally I have a duty to report this to management, but I doubt the MD was going to take himself aside and give himself a stern talking to. Workmate's girlfriend wanted her laptop fixed, and my workmate, and knowing him pretty cheeky, he asked if I could fix it. I said I could. It was slow, filled with obnoxious adverts, and had no antivirus/malware software. No big deal. All she wanted to keep was some pictures she had stored from various birthdays, weddings, parties etc. In the end, the thing was worse than anticipated, so I moved her pics onto a spare external HD I had, and then reinstalled Windows, installed AVG with a full license, and installed Malwarebytes on trial. Text her and said she just owed me the price of the AVG, and I highly recommended she pay for Malwarebytes Premium when the trial expired. Now it was time to drop her pictures back onto her laptop. She had asked if I could organize them via year because they were a mess and disorganized, so I set it to sort by date and went through all the folders and dropped them in their correct year folder. I got to one of the last folders, which was named PV. I figured after that it stood for private or something, and opened it. I had medium thumbnails set so I could see what was in the pics before I opened them. Her with her tags out, open-legged selfies, pics of her as that were clearly taken by herself in a mirror, and just as I was about to close the folder, I could see a guy in a pic with a raging harden, but it wasn't my workmate, and I could tell because, even though the thumbnail wasn't massive, this dude had a massive shoulder tattoo. Long story short, for the sake of my workmate, because he was an actual friend, I had to check the photo dates, because if she was taking and sending them while they were together, I'd have to tell him. Now, honestly, I wasn't perving when I did what I did next. It was just date checking. Keep in mind, they were in their 40s, I was in my mid-20s. I enlarged the thumbnails and sorted by date. They were all late 2012, early 2013, and there was heaps of pics. I text my mate, whose girlfriend this was, and asked when his anniversary was of when they got together. I forget the excuse I used as to why I asked, but it was something legit and not blatantly obvious. While waiting, I scrolled through these pics and found there were several pics of guys, and to my absolute horror, I opened one of my workmate with his dick out, and I will say, it was faking massive. Never looked at him the same way again. There were not many pictures dated after the picture of him, only pics of her I assume she sent him. He messaged me back and said they met via online dating in February 2013, but never had their first date until a month later. The dates all slotted together and it just appears she was speaking to various men over an 8 or 9 month period and was not shy in sending pics. The very last picture she had just on her face. I assume it was my workmate shot it onto her face and took the pic. I didn't study it, but based on everything I seen, I'm almost certain she makes home movies too. I gave the laptop back. She was very grateful, paid me for the AVG license and nothing more was said. I never told her or my workmate what I seen. I normally don't fox computers, except my own and my father's, if he's not at home, to comment every single thing, but we were good friends with another family a few years ago where we always were invited to dinner and such things, so I took care of their tech a few times. The family consisted only of females, mother, a daughter slightly older than me, and a daughter about 3 years younger than me. One day while I'm working on the computer, general cleanup, malware scanning and that stuff, I follow some suspiciously named folders and files, open an image, and, yep, that's the youngest, 14 years old at the time, and, yep, she's butt naked on the couch. Closed the image, called her mom, and showed the files to her. Now, my own mother could get as loud as a starting jet plane, but the volume that came out of that woman I never thought possible. My dad and me suddenly remembered we had some important business to attend to, outside of the possible fallout range should the mother go nuclear, and went our merry way. Next time we were there we got told how bad it really was. Not only did she take pictures and videos of herself naked, but she also sent them to multiple guys. As far as I know, she got her phone taken away, her Facebook account taken over by her mother and then deleted. Wasn't allowed to touch the computer when nobody was around to watch her, and some other sanctions I can't remember. TLDR. Found naked pictures of the 14-year-old daughter on the family computer. She got nuked back to the Stone Age by her mom. Appendix. For kids and teens, do not take pictures of yourself naked. Do not send them to other people. Do not take videos of yourself naked. Do not send them to other people either. If someone asks you to send them naked media of yourself, drop them a link to the nearest porn site. I'm not particularly interested in what's on your computer, but I was browsing a client's computer once, I don't recall why, and found some CP. There wasn't much, but it was pretty vile. My boss spoke to a solicitor client of ours about it, and he said to just leave it as he may already be under surveillance by the police. I didn't like it, but we left it that. A couple of years later the same bloke comes into the shop wanting to buy a new computer saying the cops had taken his old computer for forensic analysis, but he had no idea why. A long time ago, when network cards were optional, I was investigating a problem on a computer whereby, whenever you connected a network cable the computer would freeze up. I opened up the case, and found a dead mouse sitting on the network card. I had a naive lady bring in a second-hand computer she'd purchased from some podhead. The case was putrid. It smelled. It was gummed up, and sticky with residue from the pot. I gutted it, and cleaned the components as best I could, and installed them into an old case I donated, and threw the original out. I've had a bunch of computers come in filled with German cockroaches. Yuck. I've had a guy come in with his computer claiming to be Jesus, with proof. A guy, who appeared to be a textbook case of a paranoid delusional, came in several times to have us update the BIOS on his laptop, because that's how they got into his computer. He eventually gave up I guess, but I saw him one day talking to a tech at a big chain store about them getting into his computer. I had a woman come in to drop off a computer and she smelled like she cheated and pissed herself, which I'm pretty sure she had. I nearly vomited from the smell. I run my business in an office at my home, so people bring me computers after hours all the time. I could tell this one gal was off when I was talking to her. Her voice was deep from years of smoking, and I could tell she was not all there. She brought her desktop over, but I wasn't home. As soon as I walked in it hit me. It smelled like cigarette smoke and cat piss. Her computer was physically covered in it, and my cat was open mouth sniffing it. Not to mention live roaches crawling out. My wife made me work on it in my garage. It was a small form factor and the power supply went bad, so I had to spend $80 to order one specific for her computer. When she came to get it, I got a sob story about how she wouldn't have money till the 3rd, blah blah blah. Okay. Well, a week later she said it stopped working again. This time when she brought it, it had a chemical residue all over the inside and out. I asked what it was, and she said she set off 6 bug bombs in the same room as her PC. It was powered on and all of that fine mist got inside and ruined the motherboard. I sold her a refurb for $300. Can I pay you on the 3rd? Oh yeah, of course you can, knowing full well she never would. It has been 3 years, live in a small town, and see her all the time. She won't even look at me, let alone acknowledge I'm even around her. Best $300 I ever spent. I've been reading this since 5 AM. I just can't believe how stupid people are. Who the fuck storage is born? There's a lot of sides of it. Just watch it online, you idiot. Also, people with inappropriate photos, external hard drives, never storage anything you don't want people to see in a computer. Dude, did you eat glue when you were a kid? Did your parents drop you on your head? And oh my god, do we need to talk about browser history? Motherfucker, learn CTRL plus SHIFT plus DEL, anonymous mode. No browser history to clean. It only takes a few seconds. I only ever use this mode ever from pronoun to silly League of Legends gamma play videos on YouTube. Stop being fucking stupid. Are you all retarded? It doesn't even make sense, man. There's not one reason I can come up with for people doing stuff this way and being this dumb. Fuck. If your computer explode you lose everything, dude. Pronoun, files, family photos, the novel you've been writing for 5 years, the original PATD milk fanfic you printed years ago. Even those rare Doctor Who lost episodes that you took years to collect for BBC and that no one will ever get to see. Talking personal experience here. Stop being morons. External hard drive anything you can't cloud. Also, don't cloud anything. I don't trust it.